Evolution in Another World, solo playthrough, just how to play those solo rules, and all that good stuff. Come on back after the break. Hey everybody, welcome out to the show, Board Game Reviews. This is a YouTube channel dedicated to our wonderful tabletop gaming hobby, and this video is part of a video series looking at Evolution Another World. Now in this video I'm going to teach you how to play the solo rules themselves and show you some actual gameplay for the solo rules so you can see exactly how the solo rules work in the gameplay itself. Now the final version of the game does play 1 to 4 players, and the Kickstarter version of the game I am told actually plays from 1 to 6 players. So what we're going to do is cover just the solo rules in this video itself. If you want to learn how to play the game, see some sample gameplay for a 2-player game, have a quick overview, or actually see my review of the game, check out the videos in the series. In this video, we're going to go ahead and start things off and teach you how to play the solo rules. But if you have any comments or questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I'll do my best to answer those questions as quick as I can. You also feel free to email me off-the-shelf board game reviews. That is otsbgr@gmail.com. I do my best to answer those questions as quick as I can. If you enjoy the content and you enjoy the videos I put out there, think about supporting the channel over on Patreon. Just $1 in the tip jar is a wonderful way to say thank you. Remember, the channel is 100% sponsor fee. The wonderful thing about this is that I can give you my own opinions without being given my opinions by others who are paying me. The negative here is that all this stuff comes out of my own pocketbook. So tossing $1 in the tip jar is a wonderful way to say thank you. Help keep the channel growing strong and help keep the wonderful content coming out there. But you don't have to spend any money at all. 2 seconds and 2 mouse clicks, click that like button, click that subscribe button. Another great way to keep those YouTube analytics on my side and help keep the channel growing strongly. That's enough for the introduction. Now let's go ahead and teach you how to play Evolution Another World. Now, Evolution Another World plays just like a 2-player game when you're playing through the solo rules. There's a couple really important differences between the standard solo rules and the actual 2-player rules. One of the most important things is to understand is that you're playing versus an AI called the Shade. Now, the Shade is going to be controlled by a pretty simple if-then circumstance when it goes through its instructions. It's basically going to say if a certain circumstance exists, it'll do something. If that circumstance doesn't exist, it's going to move down a track following some various if-then kind of statements. If you're ever a computer programmer in the early 70s, you get the basic idea. It's going to try. If it can't, it'll move on to the next statement. If it can do that, it's going to go ahead and try to do that. But there are some occasional decisions the AI does need to make, and those are going to be controlled by this deck of cards right here. This deck of cards is going to have either a target or it's going to have a trait that will be affected. Those will be the only decisions that the actual AI ever needs to be making, and the AI, like I said, is called the Shade. So the way the Shade is going to win is the Shade just needs to transmute 1 of its creatures. The moment it transmutes 1 of its creatures, it instantly wins the game. Unfortunately, the player playing against a solo Shade must still transmute 3 of its creatures to win the game. So it is an absolute race when you're playing the solo game to transmute all 3 of your creatures before the Shade transmutes its first creature. First one to reach that goal of either 3 or 1 transmutations instantly wins the game. So the game does play very, very similar to the 2-player game. There's a couple different powers that the Shade does operate a little bit differently, and there's a couple of mutations that the Shade will never ever use. I'll explain how that all works, but let's go ahead and set everything up and show you exactly how the game plays as a solo game versus the Shade. So just like the standard rules, we will simply draw the top card of the energy deck, and we will fill out the energy stack as normal. We're always going to consider this like a 2-player game though, so in this case we would put out 3 energy if this was the energy card we put out. And if we put an energy card that has specific requirements on the top, we would simply follow specific requirements just like normal. After we draw our energy card and fill it up as normal for our 2-player game, we're going to go ahead and simply draw our standard hand of 5 cards just like we normally would. Simply, like you normally would, draw your face down starting evolution or your starting creature, and then you'll draw a hand of 5 cards. After you draw your simple hand of 5 cards, you are going to give the Shade 1 of its starting mutations, or I should say, its starting creature. Now, the interesting thing about the Shade is the Shade never has a hand of cards ever as it plays the game, and that's very important to understand because the Shade is going to be basically drawing a card, putting that card into play, various different actions, and then it's going to move on with its turn based on, like I said, if-then type of situation. I'll explain how that all works. It actually works pretty darn simply. The only thing you need to make sure you do, which is standard or different from the standard setup, is you are going to have a certain amount of solo cards for the AI. Like I said earlier, and I'll explain how these cards work in just a moment, these are going to be the cards that allows the AI to make its decisions whenever it needs to make a decision. So we do need to shuffle this deck of cards and place it pretty close to near the shade AI, where its deck of cards are going to go, because these will be making the decisions for it. For simplicity though, and just to make sure this is more visible to the camera, I'm just going to place these cards right here. Again, the main reason why I'm doing this is because I want them visible while I'm teaching you how to play the game with the solo rules. Now to show you how these cards specifically work, I'm going to go ahead and start a hand of cards, or just start a game, just so you can see exactly how these cards would work in case we need to make any kind of decisions based on certain actions or based on certain different things that may be occurring as we're playing the game. The way these cards are going to work is anytime the shade needs to make a decision, whether that's a decision of just choosing a target or a decision of choosing a trait, we're going to simply flip over the top card, and if it's a target, we're going to pick the top half. If it's going to be a trait, it's going to be the bottom half. And to make this a little bit more simple, how about I go ahead and do this? This makes sense in just a moment. So if I need to pick a target for the shade as doing some kind of action versus one of my creatures, I will drop the top card. And if I'm looking for a target, I'm going to look for a number. And this is a number I'm going to count from left to right. Once I get to the right, if I still have more points left on the number, I'm going to go back to the left and continue counting. So in this case, my target is, I need to look for a target of number 6. I'm going to start counting from left, counting 1, 2, 3. I still have a number left and no more creatures, so I'm going to start back on the left again, 4, 5, and 6. So if I needed to find a target, in this example, this long-tailed creature will be the target of the shade. Now if I need to pick a trait that I'm going to have to go against, again, we will simply flip the top card. I'm glad I'm getting these cards just like that. I shuffled it, but this is working out perfectly because it's going to explain exactly how we deal with the wrapping. So if I found out that this was my actual target and this was my creature I need to target, and I need to figure out which trait would be targeted, I'm simply going to count from the top and count down. And again, if I get to the bottom, I'm just going to simply wrap to the top again. So if my target trait happens to be trait number 7, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, wrapping again, and this would be the target trait. This would be really important in case for situations if it would be using fire breathing against me, I need to figure out which one of my traits would be destroyed. Well, in this case, it would be fireproof by counting if that happened to be an example. Now, if I happen to have a creature that had a lot of traits on it and had drawn that number 7, just like I show right here, I would count 1, 2, 3, 4, wrap back to the top again, 5, 6, and 7. And in this case, we'd see that long-tailed would be the target. Now, picking target traits could work for the shade attacking us. It can also work for the shade using its own abilities. Again, there may be certain circumstances. Specifically for long-tailed is a really good example. If the shade needs to pick a target for its long-tailed trait that's going to destroy, we would flip one of these cards over, and that would give us our target that we'd be going against. Now, like I said earlier, the basic gameplay is going to be set up almost exactly like a standard 2-player game. The active player gets their starting creature, and they're going to get their hand of cards. The shade is only going to get one creature, and it's going to be the creature that it starts with face down. Again, like I said earlier, it does not start with a hand of cards. The shade player is always going to be the first player on every single game. So make sure you give the starting player to the shade player, because at the start of every game, the shade goes first. Of course, we're going to transfer the first player order just like normal, but at the start of every game, the shade is always the first player. Now, the shade player on their turn is going to be taking actions based on a certain criteria based on exactly what they got going on in their hand. The very first thing the shade player is going to do at the start of his turn is it's going to look to see if it has any awake creatures. If the shade has any awake creatures, it's not going to do anything at all. It's going to continue on with its turn. But if all the creatures that the shade has currently happen to be asleep, the very first thing it will do on the start of its turn is it will draw a new creature and place it face down to the right of the current creatures that they may have. And this may continue on no matter how many sleeping creatures the shade has. If at the start of the turn, all of his creatures happen to be asleep, it will always do the very first thing of drawing a new creature face down. Don't forget, though, that the shade never has a hand of cards. It's very important. They never have any cards in their hand. If the shade has at least one creature that is going to be awake, it's going to pick one of his creatures to activate. Now, to show you how it's going to activate, let me go ahead and add a couple extra creatures to the shade and a little bit of energy just to show you exactly how it figures out exactly which one of his creatures is going to activate on its turn. The way this is going to happen is the shade is going to look at all of its available awake creatures, and it's going to activate its creature that is the furthest to the left that currently has the most energy. So in this case, we see that since it has 2 awake creatures, it would activate this creature since this is the one that currently has the most energy. If you have multiple creatures that currently have energy on them, it's going to pick the one that's furthest left among the tied creatures that have the most energy. So just to get this example one step further, let's go ahead and make it so let's wake up this creature just to make this example a little bit better. And let's say we had a situation where we had these creatures just like this. We will see that these two creatures have the most energy on it, and this one is the furthest to the left, so it will activate this creature. Situation had to look like this. We would see that these two creatures have the most energy, and it will activate this creature since it's the furthest left. If we had a situation like this, though, we would see that the one that has the most energy would be the one over here, and this will be the creature that it will activate. It's going to look for the creature with the most energy first. Then if there's any ties for most energy, it's going to activate the one that's the furthest left among all the ones that have the most energy left over. Once the shade has figured out which one of those creatures has the most energy, it's going to draw the top trait card from the trait deck, and it's going to be flipped over. Now the trait, we are going to make sure the trait has a certain facing based on the picture that is active on the trait, and that is going to be the trait that we are going to try to add to the creature that we selected as the active creature. So in this case, we see that we will get the lulling trait. Now there's two traits that the shade will never gain. It'll never gain the trait of carrying, and it'll never gain the trait of metamorphic. It doesn't care, and it's never going to change. Okay, I'm going to see my way out of here after that bad joke. But anyways, let's continue off the instructions here. Once we figure out exactly which trait we are going to be drawing, we will place this on the active creature that we selected as the active creature in the prior segment, and that will be the creature that will gain that trait. Now, there's a couple different caveats we need to follow when we're giving that trait to the creature. The first important thing is the shade will not cheat. It's not going to try to gain a trait it already has. So let's go ahead and modify the amount of energy we have here so I can change my selected creature and show you exactly what will happen if it's going to gain a trait it already has. Let's say in our example, the shade had decided that this would be the active creature because this is the creature that has the most energy on it. 1, 1, 2, furthest one from the left and currently awake. This is going to be the creature that we'll activate. And let's say in our example, we had drawn this card as a trait for our shade creature or our shade player. This is a trait it's going to gain for a currently selected active creature. We say that we have gained the trait of lulling. Well, if we look over at this shade, we would see that we would try to add the trait of lulling to this creature since this is the creature that has the most amount of energy. Unfortunately, we can't add lulling because we see that this creature already has the trait of lulling. So what will happen is this trait will bounce to the creature that's immediately to the right. Now, the creature that's immediately to the right does not have the ability to gain the trait because it already has the lulling trait. Then, at that point only, the actual gain trait will be discarded and removed from the game. Or not removed from the game, but it's going to be removed from the actual action for the shade on this turn. The shade will try to bounce the trait one time to the right, and even if it bounces to the right and the shade cannot gain that trait on the next creature over, it's not going to continue to keep bouncing the trait to the right. It'll bounce to the right one time, and if it doesn't stick on that creature because it causes some kind of conflict, then the trait is simply going to be discarded into the discard pile, and the shade is not going to gain any traits on this turn, and we're going to move on to the next action that the shade is going to try to do on its turn. After the shade has possibly gained a creature, selected its active creature that will activate because it has the most energy, and then has possibly gained a new trait, then the shade is going to move over to the action part of its turn. Now, the action part of its turn, the shade is going to try to accomplish one of 4 actions. It's going to try to accomplish these actions in order. If it can't do the first action, it's going to move to the second action. If it can't do the second action, move to the third action. If it can't move to the fourth action, well, its turn is just going to end. It's going to go back over to the player's turn to make their decisions and take the turn like they normally would. And again, it's going to keep bouncing back and forth like a standard game of Evolution, Another World, except you're still playing versus the shade player. Now, the actions that the shade is going to be doing is it's going to activate as an action the creature it's selected in the earlier part of the turn. This generally means it's going to be the creature that it most likely just gained a trait. Now, it's not always, because remember the bouncing, but whatever creature is selected earlier is the active creature it will activate. Let's go and show you the suggestions and all the different things it may possibly do in this very specific order. The first thing the shade will do is it will try to transmute the active creature. Now remember, this is the active creature we picked on this turn because this is the one that has the most energy. So it'll try to transmute the creature by having 4 energy on it. If the creature does not have 4 energy on it, it cannot transmute, and it's going to move on to the next thing. Next thing we'll do is it will see if it gained any orange traits this turn. Now it has to be one of the 3 orange aggressive traits that allow it to still attack. So if it gained fearsome this turn, it can't actually make an attack. But if it gains any one of the 4 orange traits, which are fearsome, lulling, vampiric, or fire breathing. If you added any one of those 4 traits to the creature, it will try to attack at this turn. Now remember, just because it gained fearsome doesn't give it the ability to cheat and still attack if fearsome is the only aggressive trait it has. So if I gain fearsome and all my other traits are non-aggressive, it still can't make an attack. But if it had an orange trait from an earlier turn and then gains fearsome, you know it's going to go ahead and try to attack on this turn on this activation right here, right now. So the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out exactly which one of my creatures are going to be targeted by the shade. Now let's go ahead and put me out a couple creatures in this situation right here so we can see exactly what may, or in this case, may not happen if it can successfully make some attacks. And I'll go ahead and modify things just a little bit to show you some potential chances of how things can be just a little bit different for our creatures. So the first thing we will do is, since the shade gained an orange trait this turn, it needs to pick a target of its attack. So I'll flip over the top card and I will reveal it, and I'm looking for a target. Like I explained earlier, I need to count from the left to the right that many spaces. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is actually very perfect for this example. It will try to attack this creature. Well, if we look over here, the shade's creature, it's lulling and vampiric. My creature is astral, which means it cannot attack my creature because it doesn't have the astral trait. Now, a little bit later on, after I explain all the actions, I'll explain to you the traits are a little bit different for the shade character. I don't want to cover those just quite yet, but do understand that some traits work differently for the shade creature. But let's go ahead and move on. Since it cannot successfully attack my creature, it's not going to make an attack, and it's going to ignore this action and move on to the next action for its turn. Now, let's say I pulled a target that would be a possible target. Number 3 is my target, 1, 2, 3. I have lowly and vampiric. It sees that it can make an attack against me, so it will go ahead and make an attack against this creature. Now, the important thing to understand is, like I said earlier, it will only make an attack if it can guarantee success of its attack. If it cannot guarantee success, it will not waste its time as the attack, as its action is going to move on to its next action here. But if it can make a successful attack, it will start attacking, and it will trigger its attacking traits in a very specific order. And the order it's going to do this is going to do this in the order of lulling, then it will do fire breathing, and then it will do vampiric. And now it's going to make those attacks in that very specific order. After the shade successfully makes an attack, just like normal, anytime any creature in the game makes an attack, it will fall asleep. Now, the important thing to understand is it will only fall asleep if it attacks. It's not going to fall asleep if it does the next action. And the next action we're going to speak about is the action of trying to gain energy from the source. So if it was not able to attack because it gained an orange trait this turn and it could not successfully attack its chosen target, it will try to gain 1 energy from the source. And if it can successfully gain 1 energy from the source, it will do so. And then the shade player's turn will be over. But if the shade player is not able to transmute and win, the shade player is not successfully able to make an attack because it gained an orange trait, and if there happens to be no energy left in the source, then and only then the shade will go ahead and make a normal attack with the creature that it activated earlier in the turn. Even if it did not gain any orange traits this turn, it's going to follow the standard attacks just like any attack would work for the shade player. Again, the shade is going to take its actions in the order I mentioned earlier, which is the order of lulling, the order of fire breathing, and then finally the order of vampiric, just like a standard attack. The only difference between this phase and the earlier number 2 phase is this is going to go off even if it didn't gain an orange trait earlier in the turn. Remember, earlier in the turn I said it has to have gained an orange trait of some kind on this turn to go ahead and make its attack earlier. Again, the basic actions the shade is going to do is transmute. If it can't transmute, it will go ahead and make an attack if it gained an orange trait of some kind on this turn. If it did not, then it will try to take energy from the source. If it cannot take energy from the source, then it's going to make an attack no matter what kind of trait it gained this turn. Again, using the standard flipping the card over to go ahead and pick the target to figure out which target of my creatures it's going to go ahead and attack. The important thing here, though, is if the shade is not able to do any one of those 4 actions, it will end its turn. Do note it's not going to put that activated creature to sleep. The only way the shade ever puts any of its creatures to sleep is if it performs a successful attack, just like normal. If it does not perform a successful attack, and again, successful is a keyword here, it will never put any of its creatures to sleep. And understand that the way the end round is going to go, let's go into cover that now, is the turn is going to come to an end, and we're going to go into the end phase the moment the player puts this last creature to sleep. And that's going to be immediately. Immediately when the player puts their last creature to sleep, That's when the turn ends, but as long as the player has at least one creature awake, the shade will continue to take actions. Remember, at the start of its turn, if all its creatures are asleep, it'll gain a new creature. If it has at least one creature awake, it will activate the one with the most energy, and it'll possibly gain a trait of some kind. And then it's going to go through that decision tree of winning by transmutation, possibly attacking and gaining that orange trait, trying to take from the source, or finally just going ahead and making a standard attack if it's able to do so. And again, possibly ending its turn. But like I said, once the player manages to put their last creature to sleep, that is going to immediately trigger the end of the round. When we trigger the end of the round, just like the standard game, we will draw a new energy card and we will fill up the energy source based on the new card, again, based on the 2-player count, just like standard. We will go ahead and awaken all creatures in the game, our creatures, plus any creatures that the shade may currently have. The active player will gain a new hand of mutation cards and transmutation cards based on the standard rules. In this case, if I have no creatures with energy, I am simply only going to gain a new hand of 2 cards. And of course, just like the standard game, the first player marker is going to switch over to the other player, whether that's from the shade to me as the player or me back to the shade. That's how the first player marker is going to continue to rotate every single round. Now, there's a couple different trait cards that work a little bit differently for the shade player, and let's go ahead and cover exactly what those are really quick. The shade works pretty darn simply as long as you follow its logic and AI. There's not too many changes it really does make. But there are a couple different traits that work differently for the shade player. I'm going to cover those very quickly just so you understand the minor changes these very specific traits cause and change for the shade player. And there are exactly 6 traits we need to be very mindful of. Now, just to reemphasize things, like I said earlier, anytime the shade gains a trait, it's always going to try to add the trait to its creature with the same direction of the artwork that's on the card for the trait that's being added. So if this was the trait we were gaining, we will pick Astral, not Longtail, because we know that Astral is the correct trait for the proper facing of the creature. But anytime the shade gains the Astral trait, the nice thing about the Astral trait for the shade, or maybe not so nice because this is the ability that the shade gets to use against you, is the interesting thing is that the Astral shade can attack any creature, astral or not, making this a much more nastier creature for the shade. Even if your creatures are not astral, this astral shade can still attack your creatures. Very devious of the shade player. Next up, we have the fearsome trait. Now, whenever the shade manages to make one of his creatures fearsome, we have to be extra cautious because a fearsome shade monster suppresses all of our traits. Next up, we have the trait of Longtail. Now, the Longtail trait will only be used by the shade if its current energy track is not full. So for example, if we happen to have 3 traits on our creature right here, or 3 energy on our creature right here, it will attempt to use the long-tailed. But if the energy track is all the way full, it is not going to use this long-tailed trait. It's a very important thing to understand. And of course, long-tailed, whenever it does a long-tailed, to figure out which trait it's going to discard once it uses it, if we happen to be using the thing, is we will flip over a card, and that will be the trait that we will go ahead and discard. In this case, this will be the trait that will be discarded by this creature to go ahead and use that long-tailed to go ahead and gain that benefit from long-tailed. Next up, we have the trait of Pestering. Now, a Pestering shade will only use it if it has a friendly sleeping creature. And we'll always, like normal, use a choice card to figure out which one of our creatures we will wake up. And again, we simply gain the Pestering trait just like we normally would. Now, next 2 traits are the traits of Caring and Metamorphic. I've already used the joke before, and I'm not going to use it again about it's not caring and never going to change. Oh, you know I had used the joke one more time. But if we ever get a card that has the Caring trait, or if we ever get a card that has a Metamorphic trait, we will simply flip those cards around, and those are the traits that creature will gain. Those are the only times we will ever flip over the trait cards. Beyond that, we will always try to put the traits on in the direction of the artwork. Unless it's Caring, we will flip it over. Or unless it happens to be Metamorphic, then we'll flip the trait over. But in this example, it couldn't gain this trait because we already have the Fearsome trait and we don't have any creatures to the right. If we were in this situation able to have a creature to the right, this Fearsome trait would bounce to this creature, and then that would be the action for the shade, and then we'll move on to its actual action and its activations for its turn. I think this explains exactly how to use all the powers of the shade pretty darn easy for all of you out there. I think what we're going to do now is go ahead and clean everything up and show me getting my butt kicked by the AI. Or maybe I'm going to beat it. I'm going to do my darndest to make sure that is exactly what happens. So for our solo game, let's go ahead and make things honest. Let's go ahead and shuffle. Well, let's kind of horribly shuffle this in a bad way that doesn't make that horrible sound, because shuffling cards on camera is a terrible audio noise that you never want to have in any of your camera recordings at all. that will be that deck of cards. This will be this deck of cards. And our first energy card will be the Torrid Desert 2-player game. That means it starts with 2 energy only. This will be my starting creature right here. This will be the Shade's starting creature just like that. I will draw my hand of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 cards. Did I get anything good? Possibly. And just for speed, I'm not going to mulligan any of my turns at all. Yes, I know that is not playing intelligently, but I'm doing this because I want to make this gameplay video go as quickly as possible. But I do understand that mulligan is an option. I'm just not going to do it all, making myself have a little bit of an extra challenge. So, I have my hand of 5 cards. The AI, the Shade, gets to be player number 1. Let's go and get everything started. So the first thing that happens is the Shade is going to see if it has at least 1 creature awake. Conveniently it does, so it's not going to gain another creature. So the next thing we will do is we will draw the top card of the creature deck. We will flip it over, and remember, it has to be in the specific facing. So is it going to gain this trait? Yes, it will, because it does not currently have the vampiric trait. So now we know that the Shade has 1 vampiric creature at the very start of the game, making our lives ever so exciting all the way at the start of things. Now that it has this vampiric creature, we get to go through its activation and see exactly what it's going to do to make our lives as fun as possible. So the first thing that will happen is we will go ahead and activate this creature right here. Now we know this is a creature that is being activated by the simple fact that it's the only creature that the Shade had. If the Shade happened to have multiple creatures, again, we would use the most energy to figure out exactly which creature is going to activate. But we see that this is the creature it will activate. So the first thing it will do is it will see if it can transmute. It can't transmute. So what it will do is it will gain a new ability. So looking at its vampiric ability, we know that it just gained this trait on this turn, which means it's going to go ahead and attack us at the very start of the round, making things extra super duper exciting. But here's the trick. It's only going to do an ability if the ability will actually work for it. Vampiric says that if the target loses 1 energy, then you would gain a point of energy. Since this won't actually do anything for the Shade, and that means that the trait will not actually go off for it, it's not going to activate that trait, and instead it's simply going to take 1 energy from the supply, adding it onto its creation right there, and then its turn is going to come to an end. Now remember, its creature is not going to fall asleep because it did not do an attack. It could not attack because the vampiric trait would not have successfully triggered, because my starting creature does not have any energy on it to go ahead and take. So that's going to be it for the Shade's turn. Now we get to go and look at my turn and figure out what I can do to go ahead and shut down the Shade as quickly as possible. I am thinking that shutting him down is going to be the smartest thing to do. So Astral is not a very good card for me because I cannot stop him. The only way Astral is actually going to be a good card is there happens to be any source energy that specifically looks for Astral creatures. So I am thinking that this is probably a very good card to be my very first starting creature I'm going to go ahead and add out onto the table. So having said this, I will take this creature and I will add it out. So now I successfully have 2 creatures out there on the table right now. So I don't think carrying is going to be that great right now. Fireproof might be something good to hold back. Putting his vampiric creature to sleep is really not going to help me that much, but stealing the vampiric trait from it would help me quite a bit. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a fire-breathing creature right now. Now that I've done that, I'm going to select this as my creature to go ahead and activate. Now, I could go ahead and take that energy from the source, because if I don't do it, I can almost guarantee he is going to take that energy from the source, meaning that I am not going to have a lot of options out there. So I could take that energy, but then I risk him getting a fire-breathing trait or something along those lines, and that could make my life very, very difficult. So here's kind of the gamble. Do I take the energy, or do I go right out after my enemy right here at the start of the game? I think I'm going to start playing aggressively, and that's how I'm going to play this game versus the Shade in this case. So I'm going to activate this creature. This creature will be targeting this vampire creature from the Shade right now, and I will activate my fire-breathing power. Fire-breathing is going to go off, and that means that he will lose the vampire trait because he's not fireproof. Since I forced my opponent to go ahead and lose a trait, that does mean that fire-breathing is going to go ahead and activate, and I will gain 1 energy just like this. Unfortunately, my creature is asleep, but I may have pulled a couple teeth from the vampiric enemy I'm facing. That's the end of my turn. Now we go back to the Shade. So the Shade, at the start of the turn, the first thing we'll look at to see if they have any creatures that are awake. We do have a creature that's awake, so we don't need to wake up another creature. They will simply draw another trait. Let's go and see what we will gain, and we are going to gain the trait of flying. Well, it's probably a good thing I took away the vampiric, because a flying vampiric creature is very, very troublesome, to say the least. So it will gain this flying trait, and then what it's going to do is it's going to go through its activation process. Can it transmute? Nope, it can't. Did it gain an orange trait this turn? No, it didn't. So it's going to look for one energy from the source. It'll take that last energy from the source, kind of like I was afraid it was going to do anyways, and that will end its turn. I probably should have took that energy, but again, that's the gamble you take. That's it for the turn of the shade. Now we get to go back to my turn, and I have 3 creatures. Now I could end the turn very, very quickly here, which could be a good decision. And I think I'm going to try to make that happen in a way that's also going to give me energy, which means that lulling is going to be my friend right now. I want to get as many cards as I can with energy, so I draw as many cards into my hand, so I'm not going to create a creature. I am simply going to give this creature the power of lulling. Since I've given this one the power of lulling, and I can't activate this creature, I'm going to activate this lulling creature right here, and I'm going to attack his flying creature. But I can't, because it's not a flying creature. So instead of doing that, I would love to attack his creature, but I can't. So instead of that, I think I'm just going to put myself to sleep. Otherwise, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. Although, what I could have done is, it's all about how much of a risk do I want to take. I don't want to take a risk. I'm going to activate my creature, not do any action with my creature, and then put it to sleep. Now that I have all of my creatures asleep, that means a turn is going to end, and now we're going to go to the standard end of turn like we do for a standard game. This energy card will be removed. We will flip over the next energy card, which is going to put 4 energy in the source. That's actually not too bad at all. That's actually very, very good for us. After we've done that, we will awaken all creatures that may have been put to sleep, and then I get to draw 3 new cards. 2 for the base, and then 1 because I have 1 creature with energy on it. So there'll be 3 cards. These are my 3 cards I'm going to gain. Again, I'm not going to mulligan at all because I don't want this game to drag out over painful, long thought out processes about trying to get the best cards. If I was smart, I'd probably mulligan because I don't really want another lonely creature just yet, but we're not going to worry about that. Now that we have gained our new hand of cards, we get to be the new first player, and we get to start the new turn. So I have a lowly fire-breathing creature right now. I need the ability to fly. Luckily, I gained it. So let's go ahead and add the, oops, hold on. Player order or action order is very, very important in this game. I want to create another creature. And then I am going to make a creature flying. This will be my flying creature. I am going to activate my flying creature, and my target is going to be their flying creature right there. So since I have my flying creature just like that, I will activate, I will fire breathe, I will steal its flying trait, making me super duper happy. Let us discard this. I don't know if this is going to be a good choice because he's simply going to gain a point of energy. I should have put him to sleep. Should have actually put him to sleep. You know what? That would have actually been the smarter thing to do, because then he's not going to gain energy. I'm going to retcon that, because just because I'm trying to play fast doesn't mean I'm not going to play smart. So let's give him that back. Let me start most of my turn over again. This is the creature I'm going to put into play. I'll put flying on my lulling creature, and then my lulling creature is the one I'm going to activate to attack his creature. I will attack, I will put him to sleep, and since I successfully put him to sleep, I will go to sleep as well, but I will also gain a point of energy for my lulling ability. Now I don't have to worry about that creature transmuting. Unfortunately, it does mean he's going to gain another creature. Let's go ahead and make that happen. My turn is over. His turn starts. Since all of his creatures are asleep, that means he does gain a new creature. We'll put that creature into play. Now he needs to pick a creature to activate. Well, it's pretty easy. He only has 1 awake creature to activate, so that is the one that's going to gain the new trait, which is going to be the trait of Fireproof. That's a little bit problematic, but I do believe I have Fearsome. I do have Fearsome, so it's not super problematic. So this is the creature he gained this turn, so now he's going to go through the standard routine. Can he transmute? Nope. Did he gain an orange trait? No. Can he take from the source? Yep. That is going to be the Shade's turn. It's now back to my turn, and let's see what fun I can create right here, right now. If I keep chain putting his creatures to sleep, that actually is not a bad idea. I think that's what I'm going to do. Let us put lulling down right here, just like that. I will activate this as my creature that I'm going to activate. I'm going to make this creature my target. I will put that creature to sleep. And since I successfully put a creature to sleep, I will gain 1 energy, also putting my creature to sleep. That is the end of my turn, back to his turn. So he has no creatures that are currently awake. That means he will take the first top card, gain it. He will look for the new trait, and that would be the trait of Vengeful. Well, this is going to go on the only active creature he has, so this creature is now going to be Vengeful. So I need to be Fearsome, or I need to end the turn. I am thinking that ending the turn might be the smarter decision. I am not going to create a new creature. I am not going to modify a creature. I will simply activate this creature. Ooh, do I steal from the source, though? Or do I play super duper aggressive? Charming. When a friendly creature gains from the source. You know what? That could be a smart thing. So I think I'm going to take that back. I'm not going to create a creature. I am going to make my flying, lulling creature very, very charming. It's going to be kind of like a Care Bear. Super duper charming and sweet. So I'm going to make him charming because he actually has 1 energy on him. Then I'm going to activate this creature on my turn. He will gain 1 energy, and then charming will go off. It says when a friendly creature gains 1 from the source, someone gains 1 from the supply. I think that's a smarter decision. Of course, it's probably going to bite me in the tail right here, right now. Back to him. He will activate this creature right here. Since he has at least 1 creature awake, it is going to gain the trait of flying. Okay. So it is a flying, vengeful creature. Do I end it? Oops, wait, no, hold on. I got to finish this turn. Wow, I just kind of jumped ahead there. So activation, this will be the activating one. So instead of transmutation, it can't. Did not gain an orange trait, so it's simply going to take 1 energy from the source. Okay, my turn. I could force the end turn, but then he's going to be the first player. So I am thinking could gain a hand of 6 cards. Could. But I'm not. I'm going to hold on to that. I'm simply going to activate, take 1 from the source. Now it is back to his turn. He has 1 creature. It is awake. He will gain the trait of Metamorphic. Now remember, he can never change because, he doesn't care. He will gain the trait of Tiny instead because we will flip that over. And I do not like that at all. Can he transmute? Nope. Can he attack? Nope. Can he gain from the source? Nope. So he's going to try to attack anyways. Can he attack? Nope, he cannot. So it's going to come back to my turn. And I am going to end the turn, and I am going to go ahead and put all of my creatures to sleep. End of phase, we will go ahead and discard. Draw a new source. Ooh, 5. This is going to be a very, very interesting game, how this is playing out. We will gain 5 from the source. All sleeping creatures, big and tiny, you know how to say that, are going to wake up. Now that all the creatures are awake, our source is filled. The first player marker is simply going to move over to the shade player who has all of his creatures awake, and it gets to start the turn and be the first player. But before anything happens, I have 1 card left. I'm going to gain 3 plus 2 is 5 for a total hand of 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have my 1 card plus my 5 gain cards. Let's see if I can make something magical happen on my turn. First things first, the shade gets to activate, and the first thing we are going to do is see if we have any awake creatures. We do have an awake creature. So let's find the creature that has the most energy furthest to the left, which is going to be this flying creature right here. It will gain the top trait, which will be the trait of Toxic. So now it's going to go through its logic tree. Can it transmute? Nope. Can it attack because it gained orange? No, it did not. Can it steal from the source? Why, yes, it can. I need to put him to sleep very, very quickly, because if he gains Tiny, he's going to win the game. So let us make that not happen very, very, very quickly. So I have a lot of things. I have Caring, I have Charming. I wonder if I can push a victory, or at least a transmutation here very, very quickly. I'm not flying. Can I get flying? No, I cannot get flying. I need to shut that thing down quickly. You're flying, so I know that you have to be the one I activate this turn. Let's see here. We need to be fire breathing because I need to counteract that toxic ability, and I think that's going to be the smartest thing I can do. I am not adding a creature. Although I could have, and it probably wasn't smart, but I am thinking that actually, you know what? I am going to add a creature. So before I made this creature fire breathing, I am adding one more creature down. So I have a total of 4 creatures following the player order. This is my creature I'm going to activate, and I'm going to attack his flying toxic creature. Now, since I am flying, I can go ahead and attack it because we both have a flying trait, so I'm perfectly fine on that aspect. And now I get to figure out which one of my traits and my attributes I want to go off first. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put it to sleep, and that means I'll be falling asleep. But since I successfully put a target to sleep, I will gain 1 energy. And then I will use fire breathing to get rid of toxic. That way I don't have to worry about losing anything at the end of my turn. Since I made him lose a trait, I now have my 4th energy. Unfortunately, he is going to fall asleep. Did I have pestering in my hand? That would be made things so darn nice. I do not have pestering. So that is going to end my turn, but hey, at least I'm getting close to having 1 creature transmuted, and I might have slowed him down just a little bit. Now we get to go to his turn. He has 2 creatures, both with the same amount of energy, so this one furthest left is the one that will be activated. The trait it will gain is a trait of metamorphic. Remember, he can never change, so instead, he will become fearsome. Now we go through his actions. Can he transmute? Nope. Did he gain an orange? Yep. Can he attack though? No, he cannot. So he will simply gain 1 from the source, making that timer coming very, very much, making my life much more challenging. Back to my turn. Let's see here. Lulling, fire breathing. If I did vampiric, I could really make his life difficult. But if I did... Ooh. Could lull and fire breathe. No, because he's that. But if I did vampiric, I could steal an energy. That might be worth it. Or if I did a metamorphic. No. Vampiric. I am going to make this creature vampiric. I'm not creating another creature. And this is the creature I am going to activate on my turn. This is probably a little bit of overkill, but fire breathing is not going to go off due to that fireproof trait. So I'm basically going to rely on vampiric and lulling to go ahead and do what I need to do. First thing I'll activate is lulling to put him to sleep, which will give me 1 energy, making me happy. Next thing I will do is activate vampiric. The target loses 1 energy and goes to the supply, and then I would gain that. My creature has fallen asleep, and that is going to end my turn. Now we go back to the shade player. Only creature that's left to activate is this one who was awake, so this is going to be his active creature. The trait it's going to gain is the long-tailed, which means it's a tiny, flying, vengeful, long-tailed creature that will transmute. Well, actually, it can't transmute anymore because now it has 4 traits. That's actually in my favor. So this is one that's selected. Cannot transmute because it doesn't have 4 on it, and now needs 4 because this cannot work if you have more than 3 traits, which makes me kind of happy. So he can't transmute, did not gain an orange, so he's simply going to gain 1 from the source. His turn is going to be over, and it's now back to my turn. You're both ready to transmute. If I can get energy on you, so let's see here. How can I make this happen in a great, great way? I could. Let's see if I can make this happen. Let's make him tiny. Let's take 1 from the source. Let's end our turn. Huge gamble here. This is probably not going to pan out. I'm probably going to lose. I probably do not want to do that. Probably should have put him to sleep. But poor choice on my part. Let's see if it pans out. Now we're going to go back to his turn. This will be the active one because it has the most energy. We will flip over. It will gain tiny. It cannot gain tiny. Can't bounce to the right because there's no more creatures to the right. So this is simply discarded. Now it's going to go through its decision tree. Let's see here. Actually, I forgot to activate his long-tailed. You know what? I forgot to activate his long-tailed. When he actually went and he gained 1 from the source, I should have did his long-tailed, which means I would have made a different decision. Let's go ahead and give him that ability because just because I forgot is not the Shade's problem. That's my fault for forgetting to activate the long-tailed. So long-tailed would have went off, and when he gained this 1 energy from the source, it's going to lose 1 trait. To figure out the trait he's going to lose, let's see here. Trait 1, 2, 3. It will lose the flying trait. And that would have given it, whoops, wrong location. That would have given it one more from the supply from its long-tailed, which would have made me probably pick a different choice. But it's too darn late now because, well, darn it. Oh well. Going back to its turn, it does not gain the tiny because it couldn't have. This would have been underneath. So I'm kind of kicking myself here because if I would have remembered to trigger the long-tailed, I probably would have took a different action on my turn because, as you're going to see, the shade is actually going to win the game right now because even though it can't gain the tiny trait, which it can't because it gained its third energy on a prior turn, long-tailed would have brought it down to 3 total traits, which would make me remember that it can win with tiny once it got that third energy that it already has. So now what's going to happen is you get to watch me lose because I completely forgot the order processes and completely forgot for long-tailed to activate, which is my own darn fault. But at least you can see that the shade can be a little bit brutal. Let's go and finish the shade's turn. So the shade for its turn, it gained or would have tried to gain the trait of tiny. Cannot, so it simply gets discarded. This will be the creature it activates. So, can it transmute? Well, it has tiny. It only has 3 traits on it, so tiny can't work. Does it have 3 energy? Yes, it does. It's going to discard all 3 of the energy. It will transmute successfully. And remember, the AI, the shade, only needs to transmute 1 time to win the game. So I had a really good run going. I actually, if we could have went one more round, I would have won the game most likely because I had all 3 of my creatures ready to transmute. Oh well. Hindsight is 20/20, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments, questions, make sure you leave them down in the YouTube comments down below. I'll make sure I answer them as quickly as I can. You can also feel free to email me off the show board game reviews. That is ots@bgr@gmail.com. I do my best to answer those questions as quickly as I can. Enjoy the content. You enjoy the videos I put out there. Think about supporting the channel on Patreon. Just $1 in the tip jar is a wonderful way to say thanks. Patreon.com/OTSBGR. But you don't even have to spend any money. 2 seconds, 2 button clicks. Click that like button, click that subscribe button. Help those YouTube analytics work in my favor. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you enjoyed this video series. Check out the other videos in this series for this actual gameplay for Evolution of the World. And as always, thanks for watching.